afternoon and welcome to the Living Well radio program. You can find us here every Wednesday at 1 p.m. on KATB 89.3 in Anchorage as well as KJLP 88.9 in Palmer. You can also catch us online at katb.org. My name is Camie and I'm joined again today by my co-host Betty. I always like it when you say hi to everybody, Betty.
Hi, everybody, Betty.
Everybody, Betty. I like
it's
how
better
that
than
came
Bossy
out.
Betty. Of course, this is a new year, and so we were going to come up with a new name.
I'd like to see how many people would be willing to go to our page and hashtag Bossy Betty.
I wouldn't.
That's a challenge.
No, let's not make it a challenge.
Go like our page and hashtag Bossy Betty.
Oh,
Maybe
goodness.
even share your favorite memory of Bossy Betty. Maybe they don't know
my
we're
kids-
talking about you.
Ooh,
Maybe
that could
they don't
be.
know.
We won't go any further with who I am.
That's right. We have got a unique show today. And you know what I was noticing as I was gearing up our show is we have no guest two on the microphone.
That's strange.
It's just vacant, sitting here.
This has
off.
never happened.
Never. This is a first for us.
We're not quite sure what it's going to be like.
No, we have no idea. Hopefully we can not lose our listenership after this show.
Lose our audience. That means you can't sit over there and drink coffee and eat your chips or whatever you
I
have
know.
hidden over there.
I know. I've got to really be on it here. We are just going to have some fun chatting about really just all things women. We get the opportunity to kind of behind the scenes just to have a lot of discussion about things that relate to women and women's ministry. And as we're talking with women, whether it be here in the studio or on the road, we've just learned a lot throughout this last year, haven't we? So we kind of want to talk about some of those topics and issues and just...
Well, we also want to kind of issue a challenge to the women for this new year, this year 2017, to see if we can help maybe change some of the way we're thinking or our perspectives on a few things.
Yeah, and so we'll put that challenge out here in a little while as we kind of develop some thoughts, and it'll be neat to maybe even have the women share how they're meeting that challenge and what they're going to do.
It's a good idea.
To set the goal there. So, I just want to ask you, Betty, what would you say, what is your passion behind what you do with Alaska Christian Women's Ministry? What is it that God's laid on your heart to fill a gap with women that you see today?
I would say a lot of it would have to be encouraging women, to let them know that they're not alone. You and I can both agree that every woman, in some sense, we're all alike. We've all been hurt. We've all been disappointed. We've all dealt with loss. We've dealt with tragedy. We've been mad. We've been angry. We've been upset. We've all had these same emotions. And to encourage women that they're not alone in their walk and their struggles. And if they're just willing to open up and to share, then they will find out that they're not alone. And so that would probably be it.
Yeah, and that's difficult for women to share their weaknesses because there's so much pressure on us today to, it's interesting, and I know we've talked about this before with Pinterest and Facebook and just all of the resources out there. It has allowed women so many more resources to do crafty things, to get new ideas, find out and learn from other women. But at the same time, that's elevated the expectation.
Yes.
Because now everybody kind of knows how things could be based on those being the measure for what is excellent and what is right. So it's interesting how that has transformed the woman today and the expectations that have been put on her.
Well, I'm not so sure that other women put the expectations as it is the woman herself puts the expectations on herself.
Yeah, that's true.
I'm still not quite certain about that. I may think that other women expect me to do things, but I doubt that when many women really think about me throughout the day, in the course of their day.
Right.
They have other things on their mind.
Yeah.
So when I look at Pinterest and I see a cake I want to make or the way I want to look, it's an expectation I'm putting on myself. And I can honestly say I rarely have had a successful Pinterest adaptation, I should say. I could create my own board and say Pinterest fails.
I know. We all have a few of those, don't we? It is tough to recreate those things. I don't know.
Something we did last year we did some what we call street interviews at the Priceless event, The Gift. And I think we interviewed about 15, maybe 20 women, all at different times throughout the evening. And I was really kind of surprised. We asked them all the same questions, but I was surprised at their answers. They were all pretty much the same.
They were, weren't they? That was surprising. And really to validate what we, already were feeling amongst women. And this is, what's cool about this is it's unique to Alaska. Well, I mean, it may be, extend those boundaries, but it's just neat to get to know the women here in Alaska and know the issues and how they're looking at things.
One of the questions we asked was, what divides our women? And without fail, all the responses except for one was comparison, competition.
Yep. And it phrased a little differently, but all meaning the same thing, passing judgment, expectations, whether it be on yourself or from others, and then the comparison factor. Yep, that was definitely the top of the list.
And then the other question we asked, what
bonds and unites women together. Yeah.
And they all said relationships, conversations with other women. And I don't know, it just got, to me, it just went to prove how important relationships are. I mean, I've always known that, but to hear many, many other women say the same thing was just kind of confirmation.
Yeah, and as I'm thinking back on those interviews, another thing I heard them mentioning that unites and bonds was purpose.
Yes.
So, maybe there's a woman listening that would say, okay, well, great, it's friendship that bonds people. Well, I don't have that in my life. Well, and that's where you want to get out there and have a purpose and a cause and get involved in your church and serve. And that's where you're going to find your friendships. I was reading this book not long ago written by John Maxwell, I believe it was, and he was talking about how friendships and relationships are formed. And a lot of people think, the myth is that that's based on common interests. Well, he said it's proximity. And so it's proximity, and when you spend time with people, that is where friendship and relationship is grown, not necessarily in common interests. You might have a woman who, is very career-driven, and if she's serving in a same capacity or similar capacity as another woman who's a stay-at-home, homeschooling mom, that's going to drive them together. And hopefully, anyway, it just was really interesting to realize that.
We have to make sure we make time to invest in relationships. We can't have our calendar so packed full that we don't have time for these conversations.
Yes.
A phone call, which I will be the first to admit, I hate making phone calls. Something that I just don't like to do, and I avoid it at all cost. But sometimes they're necessary.
I'm going to start calling you more.
Well, you can call me. I will talk on the phone. Oh. I just hate making phone calls.
Yeah.
I don't like that. But I love meeting women at, different places and just chatting and get to know them. The other thing that I thought was interesting about these questions is that we talk to women in all stages of life.
Yes.
They were not a certain age. They didn't look a certain way. It was all different women.
Yep.
And the responses was all the same. So, in my scientific conclusion, we all struggle with the same thing.
Yes. Which kind of brings me to the project that we've been working on, In Her Shoes, and just it confirms that the Lord has laid that on our heart for a reason. People are spending time in the virtual world, and so we want to bring that common ground, if you will, to women, to just expose the fact that we are all struggling in some capacity. Not that we want to spend a lot of time dwelling on that, but we want to start celebrating the story in each other versus comparing and judging. We just want to celebrate with her.
Well, we want to also show them how God brought us through it.
Yes.
That is the focus of this particular project, In My Shoes, is how God brought each and every woman through their crisis, whatever it was. And it doesn't matter whether it's big or little. When you're going through it, it's a crisis. It's a big crisis. And the purpose is to let the women know that God is there, and He will never leave us or forsake us, and He will bring them through it. And a lot of times it's just sharing your story.
Yeah, and maybe that crisis is just a season of absolute overwhelmed busyness.
Yes.
And just hearing another woman share how she walked through that and how God spoke into her life and breathed life into that season would just be so encouraging to me. And so I think there must be other women out there that would appreciate that as well.
I hope so.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hopefully, this brand new year, the videos will be ready to launch. Hopefully, we're hoping sometime during January
Yes.
of this year to launch them.
We've already had how many women share their video testimony, Betty, would you say?
Around 20.
Around 20.
And, we're looking for more. And it doesn't matter whether I think that their story is big or little. It's what they think, how they view it.
Yes. And what's cool is I just want to share with our listeners that, some of these women we've been attending church with for some time, but to sit them down and have them share a piece of their story in 10 to 15 minutes has just been so encouraging to me, because you just hear those places of their heart that you just don't get to know in passing, which brings me back to what you said, the spending time to really know women in your life and around you.
And a couple of weeks ago, we had Camille on the show, and we were talking about gifts, the different types of gifts that you can give, and she was talking about time.
Yes.
Time and gifts from the heart. And I think giving people time, your absolute time, your attention, is one of the greatest gifts you can give people. And that's really the only way to develop any kind of a friendship or any kind of a relationship with another woman, is to give of yourself.
Yes.
Time, energy, attention. And I know we as women, we're all busy and we all struggle, but if we want to make a difference in the life of someone, then that's what we got to do.
I was recently reading, is it in this book I'm reading, or did I read it somewhere else? I'm not sure. I'm currently reading a book called Breaking Busy. So far, great book. But I believe she was talking about that has become the new pedestal that women stand on.
I'm too busy.
Yeah. Or you ask how you're doing. And I loved how she said this, because it's so true. You say, good, busy. There's a ... in there. And that's what everybody says.
I'm busy.
And if you don't say that, it means you're not doing enough.
One of the things that I am learning to do is say no. And I shared this with you earlier, is my phone, the calendar on my phone. If I were to lose it, I don't know what I would do. But when I have appointments, no matter what they are, meetings, whatever, it's in my phone. And so I can look at my calendar, and for each box, each date, there's a dot. And that dot means I've got something going on. So I've trained myself to look at it ahead of time to see what I'm going to do. And when I start getting too many dots, I have to say, no, I can't do anything else.
By the way, your week looked pretty dotted up this week. As you were showing me, I was asking Betty for some tips on how she manages her schedule, just trying to glean some wisdom there. So anyway, you got a busy week. You need a day off next week.
I'll take one. I think that's coming real soon.
Oh, good.
Several days off.
Oh, good. And I think some new ideas are going to come from that.
Oh, we'll see. We'll see.
That's
You just never know.
Exciting.
You just never know. One of the challenges that we wanted to issue to the women was possibly spending some time in prayer and asking God to give them a word for the new year, a word that they could pursue, that they could apply to their life, that might take care of some of this jealousy, this discontent, this comparison, competitiveness. And so some of the words that we came up with that you would be interested in pursuing, one was contentment. There's many verses in the Bible that talk about being content. And you and I had talked a couple of weeks ago about the one that everybody uses, that Paul wrote, says, I've learned to be content in whatever state I'm in. But nobody talks about the fact that he says, I've learned to be content both in a lot and when I have very little. And to me, that says that at one point in his life, he had quite a bit. and he was learning to be content in that. And we as other women, we need to stop being jealous of women that maybe have more than we do. Maybe they have a bigger house or a nicer car or whatever.
Or a better marriage.
Yes.
Or a better relationship with their children.
Or the color of their hair.
Yeah.
You know, whatever it is.
So many things.
But the women that have a lot, there's nothing wrong with having a lot. You just need to be content with it.
Mm-hmm.
And then Paul goes on to say, even when I had little. And that's hard. It's hard when you have little and you want more and more. But the Bible talks a lot about being content with what we have.
Yeah.
So that's one word that we wanted to throw out there that maybe some woman would like to claim as their word for this new year.
Mm-hmm. And then another word we talked about was abide.
Abide.
To abide in the Lord. And we asked women that question at our street interview. Should I be calling that street interviews? Why do I call it that? It's just kind of very casual street interviews that we like to just stop women and ask them intriguing questions and just see what women are thinking. So that's kind of what I'm referencing here. But we asked them, what do they think it means to abide? And it was awesome to get their answers. They were all pretty much, similar of what they thought that meant. But, in speaking of busyness, that's probably, without question, what is going to fall off of the calendar is spending time in solitude with the Lord.
I looked up the word abide in the dictionary. You remember those dictionaries?
Yes,
actually, I did it on
those.
my.
Oh, okay.
I did that on my phone. And the word abide means to remain, to continue, stay. And then it goes on to say to continue in a particular condition, attitude, and relationship. And so when I think about the verse in John chapter 15, it says, if you abide in me, it takes on a whole new meaning. If I replace that word abide with the definition, it would be, Jesus would be saying, if you, Betty, will continue in this attitude, in this relationship with me, then I, to abide, to stay there. And that's a safe place to be, I think. It's a restful place to be. But it takes an effort. I believe it takes an effort.
Yes.
An intentional effort to abide in him instead of going off on my own tangents, to remain in him, to think about his word, to think about him, to spend time talking to him, just talking about. But if we would do that, if we would abide in him, then that also would take care of a lot of the jealousy and the comparisons that we make. That would help us to be content.
Yes, absolutely. And, even just referencing making time for people, we can't pour out if we're not abiding.
Right.
And what I'm learning just in hearing you talk about this verse and what it truly means, it's not really just your quiet time. It's to remain. So that means even when I'm busy, I'm to be abiding. I got another thing to do. Now I feel busier. No, I'm just being silly.
Well, it's true. I mean, it will eventually become an attitude that we adopt.
A behavior. And that's what everything else is going to flow from.
Right. And you're right when you say it's not just your morning quiet time or your evening quiet time with him. It's a 24/7 attitude.
That means when things don't go my way, I'm abiding.
And that's hard.
Yeah.
Then when things are not going our way, it's difficult, because we all want our own way.
Yeah.
And we all want things right now. And we don't want any of these bad things to happen to us. It's abiding in him.
Too, I think lately what the Lord has been showing me is that you can't always have instant resolution, whether it be in a relationship, a circumstance, or a situation. And so I think to me, to abide means that you can, when you are abiding in him, when you are remaining in him, that you can have peace without resolution.
Right.
Because you're seeking him in that, and that's been a really difficult lesson for me to learn because I just want to find the solution. Like right now, I just want to get to whatever it is that's going to solve this. And sometimes you just can't, but you can still have that peace without anxiety while you're waiting for that resolution, whatever that might look like.
It's so hard. I'll speak for myself, to wait
Yes.
because we want it right now. But it's all in God's timing. And that's a phrase that I've had to learn to trust. I've had to learn to accept it, that it's all in His timing. And if we can wait, if we do wait, if we will wait, then things just seem to fall in place.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I used to be really bad to try and manipulate, try and maneuver things my way.
Right.
And I gave that up 99%. No. I try really hard not to manipulate things because I don't want to do that. I want it to be God's way. But if we wait for Him, wait for His timing, it's so much better.
So you picked a word this last year.
I don't know that I picked it. It kind of...
The Lord laid it on your heart for a word. Without even having to share the details of maybe even what that word was or how you arrived at it, but how did that speak into your life over the course of this last year?
Oh, my goodness. It changed the way I looked at everything. Well, I knew that God was trying to teach me something. And I have heard people say that God gave me a word for this year, God gave me a word for that year, and I never really did do that. I didn't think much about it. Worked with other people, but I never tried it. But this year, or in year 2016, I went through a slump. I felt like there was this dark cloud over my head. I could not pray my way out of it. I couldn't read my way out of it. I did not understand what was going on, and I would ask God every day, several times a day, what are you trying to tell me? What do I need to learn? What are you trying to teach me? And I was reading His Word. I was praying more, and it took weeks. It took weeks. But I read an article, and this lady talked about how we as women, we need to be awestruck by God. And that just struck something within me that I knew. I knew that that was what God was trying to teach me. He wants me to be awestruck by Him. And it totally, from that moment on, it was immediate. I felt like the clouds lifted and the waters parted. I could breathe again. I could walk upright again. I began to look out my window, and I noticed how beautiful it was outside. The sun was shining, and the sky was blue, and the clouds were white and fluffy, and I began to think, you are awesome, God. You are awesome. You created all this. You made all this just for no other reason for me to enjoy. And so I began to look at everything. When I would hold my grandson, he was just a tiny baby at that time. And I think I would watch his little hands, how they would move, his little fingers. And I thought, God, you're awesome. That you would think to create a life like this, and how you would knit all of his little pieces together so that they all worked properly. God, you are awesome. And I began to look through the Bible. There's many, 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 many verses. I don't remember how many that talks about the awesomeness of God, the awe of God, the awe of wonder of God, the majesty of God, the gloriousness of God. And just gave me a whole new perspective on everything. And not only that, I had a couple of speaking engagements, and this was what he wanted me to talk to the women about, how awesome He is. And you know what's amazing is when I take my eyes off of my problems, off my challenges, and I look at Him and remember how awesome He is, my problems go away. I don't think about them anymore because I'm totally focused on Him and how majestic He is. So my word for 2016 was awestruck.
I love that word. Would have never thought of it.
I wouldn't either if I hadn't read the article.
I love it.
And
you know what you just said reminds me of, speaking of words and picking a word, I heard a pastor say that he has this discipline in his own life, and he's kind of challenged his congregation to do the same. But the word awesome is reserved for describing God.
Yes.
And so wouldn't that be neat to pick some words like that? Maybe there's that, and maybe there's another that you would just say, you know what, that word's reserved to describe my God.
I try and do that. Years ago, I started using that word just for God, And so now I'll use words like, oh, that was fantastic, or that was wonderful, or you did a great job. But I don't use the word awesome.
Mm.
I use it for him. Another thing that, and this is kind of, in a way, goes along with it, but kind of off the subject a little bit. But
That's okay. We can do that.
can we do that?
Uh-huh.
We have a blog.
Yes.
Alaska Christian Women have a blog, and one of the authors, Jen Cudmore, I think it was beginning the week after Thanksgiving or maybe the week before Thanksgiving, she began writing a series on fasting. And she was issuing a challenge to all women in Alaska to join her on a 21-day fast in January. It's not too late to start, not too late to join them. But there's something about fasting and praying that gives you clearer thought. I would encourage any woman, if you're interested, to go to our blog spot. It's akcwm.blogspot.com and type in the search engine fasting, and all of her posts will come up. And my point is, it's a great way to start the year.
Mm-hmm.
It's a great way to start the year, and it will, you'll be amazed at what God will reveal to you through fasting and praying.
Maybe there's somebody listening, Betty, that doesn't know what fasting is.
Well, she's, in Jen's post, she's giving several options of what kind of fast to do. It's during the Bible, it was always with food, giving up a portion of food, food for a day or two. There's a 21-day fast. There's the Daniel fast. When you read Daniel, you'll read where he ate only, what was it? My mind's going like things made with grains and seeds and vegetables.
Mm. The Daniel diet is where that comes
yes.
from. Okay.
Mm-hmm. And then some people do like a 40-day fast where Jesus went without food and water for 40 days in the wilderness. But Jen has listed all those different types, but she's also suggesting maybe you're just going to give up coffee, or you're giving up caffeine, or sugar or white flour. Something, anything. So you're free to choose whatever you want to do.
Now, let's be clear. This should be something that's hard for you to give up, because if I were to give my husband the option, go, well, I am only drinking milkshakes for 40 days. That's my fast.
I don't think that would work.
I don't think so either.
The thought behind it is you're going to sacrifice something that your body really wants and really craves in order to get the finer things of God. So it's a good way to start the new year.
Yeah.
If you're wanting to accept the challenge of God giving you a word, that would be a great way to find it.
Now, I'm gonna get into something that might be controversial. I don't know, Betty. Tell me if I do. But I see these people that go on these fasts of like Facebook or technology. They put it away. I'm not sure, but please correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not sure what good it does to put it away for a time and then go right back to it where you were. I think you should come out of a fast changed.
Well, I believe that's the idea. Now, during the Bible times, during the biblical days, they didn't have Facebook and they didn't have internet. Fasting was giving up food. And so I don't, when I have fasted, it's always been food. So other than that, I don't have any frame of reference for fasting from social media, anything like that, TV, anything like that. But if you're going to follow the biblical guidelines,
it should transform something in you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there should be a change. There will be a change, if you're doing it God's way. Maybe people that stay off of Facebook, maybe when they come back, maybe after 6 weeks or whatever, they come back on it, they have a new attitude.
Not passing any judgment at all. Just talking about that, because I'm seeing that to be a pretty common one now, and I think that's a great thing. If you're imbalanced in that area and you need to take a break, by all means. But probably re-implementing it back into your life with balance would be the idea.
With maybe
versus
a time limit, 15 minutes a week or something.
Right. Yeah.
I don't know. So, okay, well, going back to the words, and we've also talked about maybe a word like friend. The women we've interviewed talked about being lonely. And, sometimes being lonely is going to take us to make the first step.
Yes.
You know, the Bible talks a lot about being a friend, and I think I told you
Show yourself friendly.
Mm-hmm. And let's see, I had it here. The word friend is mentioned in the Bible 219 times.
Wow.
So it must be pretty important.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes it takes us making the first move. I've had people say things to me like, when I'm out, unfortunately, my personality is I'm very focused on what I'm doing. I have tunnel vision, and I don't see what's going on the right or left of me, and I don't always see people. And they will say, I saw you. I say, you did? And they say, but you didn't speak to me. And I said, well, I didn't see you.
Mm-hmm.
If you saw me, why didn't just come and speak to me?
Right.
And so sometimes it takes us walking over and speaking.
Yes.
Making the first move.
I think that's really important. And we were talking about that with Camille, and I had mentioned this then. But, in talking to the women and interviewing them and them sharing that they are lonely, that I think that is important for us to remember instead of always looking for good friends. And this seems so elementary, but, women are so busy today that it's good for us to come back to these basics, but show yourself friendly.
Right.
And do those things that are kind and make your friends and the women in your life feel loved. And I guarantee it's going to be reciprocated because they're going to be filled by you
Right.
and want to return that.
Sometimes it's as simple as just smiling.
Yeah. Isn't that the truth?
Mm-hmm. Just smiling sometimes. Making yourself appear friendly.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you're having a bad day. I guess I tend to wear my feelings on my face. I don't want to. I've even had to pray and ask God to change the look on my face.
Really?
Because I don't want to look, because my kids will say, Mom, you look, you're mad. I said, well, I'm not. And I was like, God, change the look on my face. Help me to change it.
Uh-huh.
And I'll go look in the mirror and say, well, what does it look like?
What does it look like?
I know.
And can you duplicate it?
Right now? I don't know.
No, I mean,
I'm not even aware of it.
When you go look in the mirror and try to do it, can you do it?
No, because I don't see it, but other people do.
Have you heard? I think it's Mark Gungor who says this, but he talks about marriage, and he's a comedian at the same time. But he talks about when you're really upset with your spouse, go while you're right in the moment, go in the front of the mirror and just look at yourself when you're mad.
That's exactly what the first thing I would think of doing.
I know, right? But it would be a good thing to do if somebody was like upset with you, and you just get a mirror and you hold it up.
Look at your face.
They're going to crack up or get madder.
Yeah, one or the other. I would hope crack up.
More mad. I don't know.
Another phrase we looked up was love one another. And you found, how many? Was it 100?
It was 101, but I think that was unique to that particular version, which I can't say I recall what version that was, but it was amazing to hear that there's that many verses about one another, whatever that might be.
Mm-hmm. One another. We tend to think of love one another, be kind one to another. What is it? Tenderhearted one another, treat each other kindly. Yeah, I think that would be a good phrase to look up.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. It's just neat to take a word and look through the Bible and just see all the different ways that it's referenced. And just one way to study the Bible is do a word study.
But if we can take these words and apply them, really apply them to our lives, it will change our lives.
Well, absolutely.
I know Awestruck changed my year. It made me view things in a totally different way. And so I just encourage the women that might be listening to spend some time with God and see if there's a word He wants to give to you to make it yours this year. And there's one other thing that I want to suggest to women that might be listening, and to myself, that we take a look at our calendars and see if there's something that we can give up or not do. Leave some time open to build relationships with other women. Just a thought, but I think it would be good for all of us to reach out to each other and to go meet for coffee, have somebody over and cut a pie or cut a cake.
Yeah.
And share with them. Share with the women what God's doing in your life, or just build new friendships this year.
Yeah. Now, of course, I don't want anybody to take that the wrong way. It's not at the expense of your husband or family, right? I mean, That's not at all what we intend. But just the value of having good friends, even if it's just one woman that you can pour into and she reciprocates that. There is so much value in growing in your faith with another godly woman.
Right. And there's so many women that need a friend.
Yes.
That need a godly friend. So I would encourage them to do that.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Betty, so much.
Oh, it was my pleasure.
Thank you for being my guest today.
You're welcome. My check will be in the mail, right?
Yes. We want to thank you for joining us for another Living Well radio program, and you can find us here every Wednesday at 1 p.m. on KATB 89.3 in Anchorage, as well as KJLP 88.9 on Palmer. You can also catch us online at katb.org, and also go like us on our Facebook at Living Well Radio.